Thumbelina by Jordan Elizabeth and Brady. Once upon a time, there was a woman who desperately wished for a child but didn't know where she could get one, so she turned to a witch for help. The witch, ever so helpful, sold the woman a barley corn, and not just any kind of barley corn, but the kind that would grow up to be this woman's child. She hurried home and planted the little barley corn, which instantly turned into a tulip flower, and when she kissed the tulip, it opened to expose a young girl the size of half a thumb's length, and that is how she got the name Thumbelina. Since Thumbelina was so tiny, she depended on her mother for all her needs. Her bed was made from a walnut shell with a rose petal for a blanket. Her mom created a pond for her to play in and even oars to get across. She also carried the role of keeping Thumbelina safe from the outside world around her. However, on one weary night, a hideous toad crept through an open window and stole Thumbelina from her walnut bed. Once Thumbelina awoke, she found herself floating in the middle of a pond, helplessly, and began to weep. Once the toad came over and told Thumbelina that she would be wed to her son. She was not thrilled about the unpleasantness, but quickly obliged because at least she wouldn't be alone. However, once the fishes heard the news about Thumbelina and the toad's son to wed, they became infuriated and cried, "No, that must never be." And they tore the thread holding Thumbelina in the pond, and she began to float downriver. Thumbelina became very anxious and lonely as she floated along the river, afraid that she would not be able to protect or care for herself properly without someone else there with her. She even started to criticize herself for how careless she had been to leave the window open that night and for trusting the fishes. She had started to give up all hope when suddenly a beautiful white butterfly appeared overhead. Now Thumbelina knew that she needed to stay with this butterfly and never be separated. And for that to happen, she had to do something drastic. So Thumbelina tied the leaf she was on to the butterfly and felt a bit of relief, until something else tragic happened. A flying beetle came and swept Thumbelina up into the air, which separated her from the butterfly, who was still tied to the leaf and now unable to free itself. The beetles, however, decided that they did not like Thumbelina and called her ugly, for she did not have enough legs and looked too much like a tiny human. So they sat her in a flower and left her there. She searched desperately all summer long for someone to care for her, even on days when she felt like she couldn't go any further, because as far as she knew, she was going in circles and had no idea the direction she needed to be walking in. One shivering night, she stumbled upon the house of a field mouse and began begging for something to eat. The field mouse took Thumbelina in with open arms, and Thumbelina quickly became attached to her. Some would even say clingy. One night, the field mouse had a friend come over who was a mole, and not just any mole, but he was a very wealthy mole with many rooms in his house and beautiful black velvet fur. The field mouse told Thumbelina how lucky she would be if the mole was to choose her to be his wife. But this only upset Thumbelina, for Thumbelina didn't want to leave the field mouse and go live with the mole. Fearing that she would end up alone, by disagreeing with the field mouse, she kept her feelings about the mole to herself. As the nights went on, Thumbelina had a lot to think about and decided to explore down a dark tunnel that connected the mole and the field mouse's house, and stumbled upon a swallow that was near death. She nursed it back to life over the coming weeks until it was strong enough to fly away, and when he asked Thumbelina to fly away with him. She eagerly wanted to fly away because she didn't want to marry the mole, but she couldn't be separated from the field mouse without reassurance that it would be okay, so instead, she stayed. She tried thinking of all the different ways that she would not have to marry the mole and still be able to stay with the field mouse, but any option she thought of concluded in her leaving the field mouse, and that just wasn't an option. She couldn't be alone. Until one day the swallow returned and once again requested that she fly away with him. Thumbelina was torn on what to do and felt like she could not trust her own judgment. She contemplated and decided that whether she stayed or flew away, both options would again result in her losing the person she clung to. But at least if she flew away, she knew the swallow would take care of her. As the swallow insisted again and persuaded Thumbelina to join him, she leapt onto his back and flew away into the sunset, leaving the field mouse and the mole behind. The swallow flew Thumbelina to the most beautiful country that was full of so many fruits, smells, and animals that Thumbelina began to wail in relief and happiness. He then placed her upon a little flower, and to her surprise, there was an entire community of people her size in all the flowers. Thumbelina was quite stricken by the king of the community as he was to Thumbelina. The second he laid eyes upon her, he instantly asked her to be his wife. "Queen of all the flowers," he said, to which she exclaimed, "Yes." He then gave Thumbelina his crown to wear and a pair of wings so she could fly herself to each flower. Thumbelina was so in awe that some may call it love at first sight, and some may call it dependent personality disorder. But she didn't even mind when he changed her name to Maya, because she was so eager to be submissive to the king and to have finally found her forever person.